But Linda Burney, the federal Labor MP for the Sydney seat of Barton, she was elected to the federal parliament in 2016 after 13 years in the New South Wales Parliament as the member for Canterbury. Ms Burney has held a number of positions in the Shadow Ministry and is the current Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians. I'm pleased to say she's on the line with me now. Ms Burney, good afternoon.
How are you, Mark?
I'm very well. Lovely to talk to you as always. First and foremost, your reaction to what's happened during the arrest of the 16-year-old teenager at Surrey Hills, if you can.
Well, I've been listening to yourself and others during the day, and also looked at a lot of footage last night. I've looked at social media, and I've also read the comments that have come from places like the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, which I think are very measured comments, saying that there is an internal investigation that will eventually go to an external investigation, and that's important to happen. My reaction was that it was pretty rough treatment. I understand the points that you are making, and I am glad that the most senior levels of the police force are taking this very seriously, and I think they've acted extremely professionally in terms of liaising with the community and, most importantly, with the young man's family.
Linda, the teenager said to the officer, "I'll crack you across the effing jaw, bro." Is that an acceptable way for anyone to talk to a police officer, let alone a 16-year-old boy?
Well, I can't say that I think that's acceptable, but as the sister of the young man said on radio this morning, teenagers are lippy, you know, they will say things, and I think that the adult in the room and the professionally trained person needs to understand that they can either react to that or see it for what it is, and I'll leave the investigation to take its course. I think the most important thing is that this has raised the broader issue, Mark, that I'm sure you've been exploring as well, and that is the number of Aboriginal people incarcerated at the moment, particularly young people, and what the outcomes of the Royal Commission some 30 years ago actually spoke about. And finally, in the context of what's going on in America, otherwise I suspect that this would not be getting the prominence that it is.
Well, you said the other day, Miss Burney, how we should be using George Floyd's death as an opportunity. An opportunity. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is clearly the death of Mr. Floyd has unleashed something more than just Black Lives Matter in America. I think it's tapped into the inequality that exists in that country, not just with African Americans, but more broadly. But the other thing is the opportunity of making sure that we understand that in this country there are issues that we all should be dealing with, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, families as well as governments and government instrumentalities, so that we really do have a good look at the way in which we are incarcerating young people in this country and what some of the issues are that could alleviate that level of incarceration.
But Ms Burney, maybe I'm wrong here. I can't see the correlation between what's happening in the United States and the arrest of a 16-year-old kid at Surrey Hills, given it doesn't matter whether the young bloke's Aboriginal, whether he's, whether he's a white Australian, whether he's from another country. He threatened a police officer and he was arrested. Why are we making this a race issue?
Well, I think there is probably a bit more to the story than that, Mark. I don't know what the reason was that the police were talking to that group of young Aboriginal men. I have no idea, so I
but the reason why the police took the action was because, quote, "I'll crack you across the effing jaw, bro." So it's got nothing to do with race. It's got to do with a threat levelled at a police officer.
Well, I'm not going to defend anyone. I think the police have taken a very appropriate action. I also think that it does raise the issue. You might disagree with me, and that's fine. It does raise the issue of policing methods when it comes to groups of young Aboriginal people. I do think that the senior ranks of the police have recognised that there is an issue, and their actions are very appropriate. And but the broader issue, I mean, there is this one incident, but the broader issue is over 400 Aboriginal people have died in custody since 1991, and that's the point that I was making.
I'm not taking anything away from that, Miss Burney, and I applaud the work you're doing on that topic. But I've been sharing with my listeners this afternoon. I used to live at Waterloo, which is obviously a very proud Indigenous population, and I used to go to the Cauliflower Hotel, and I'd sit there with Indigenous elders and talk about the issues that the Indigenous community are facing. And they often told me stories about them sitting down with senior police officers and working with them closely. So I think I'm a little bit confused by the comments today from the 16-year-old's family, who are trying to suggest there's some sort of divide in the community between the Indigenous population and the police. What would you say to that?
Well, I don't know about now, but certainly the work that Commander Frydenberg and when he was the commander in the Redfern area had done with organisations like the Tribal Warrior and Long Bay Jail, and that were absolutely commendable, with the National Indigenous Institute there in Redfern. But we just can't. It is really important to understand that if you went to a community like Yuendamu, where there was that shooting of Kumanjayi Walker last November, you might get a very different view. And I think it's important to say, Mark, that there are some very good relationships and lots of work that have been done between the Aboriginal community and the police in many, many communities. I'm very aware of that. But not just the police, but the broader community needs to understand that you can't take away history. I mean, the police were not by their choice, but were the instrumentalities that were mostly used to remove Aboriginal children through the stolen generation.
I get all of that, Miss Burney, but I'm more talking about the situation that's happened in the last couple of days at Surrey Hills.
Yeah, I understand that, Mark.
That's what we're sort of having a chat with. But again, I think you've done some great work in as far as reconciliation goes in this country. I hope this isolated incident isn't used as some sort of backward step on that path. I thank you for jumping on the line and having a chat.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
See you later. Linda Burney, who is, of course, in the Shadow Ministry, the current Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians.